I kind of already did this video, how I became a wrestling fan. This is going to be more zoomed in on TNA, how I became a TNA fan. First, let's go back all the way to the first Wednesday night show. I was there live in attendance. I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't really understand what TNA was. I thought it was just a local indie show. It turned out when I got to the building and everybody was talking about TNA was going to be on pay-per-view. To me, um, in 2002, I wasn't as in the know about online wrestling, and I thought that TNA on pay per view meant this was going to be a mega. I thought it was going to be a WCW level. I thought this was the next turn in the chapter of professional wrestling, and it was, but not in the way I thought it was. Yeah, I found out it was going to be on Wednesday nights, and I was still pretty enthused about being a part of the first show, thinking this could be a huge deal. It was a huge deal, but at the time I wasn't really sure. From there, I remember the ring breaking. They talk about this on the TNA Year One DVD. The Harris brothers, big freaking boys, put the ring back together. Just actually, the show had already started, and they changed the segments around so they could fix the ring, and they were able to fix the ring. And of course, AJ Styles was one of the first acts, and he's got to be jumping off the top rope, and the top ropes came in on themselves. So I know AJ wasn't really sure about how he was going to be able to bounce off the top ropes. The top ropes were broken. I know he was concerned about that, but it is what it is. The show went off without a hitch. Well, other than that hitch, but the show went off, and from there, I gotta say I watched TNA for many different reasons. In the early days of TNA, my reason for watching TNA was much like most people's reason back then, the X Division. AJ Styles, Low Key, Jerry Lynn. The X Division was just stacked top to bottom with high flying, the Flying Elvises, the Spanish Announce team. The list goes on and on and on. And a lot of people watch the X Division for those reasons. And you didn't really watch for the main event title picture. The World Heavyweight Champion would become Ken Shamrock. I'm not knocking Shamrock, but let's just be honest, it is what it is. And you watched for the X Division back then. At least I did. Maybe somebody did watch for Shamrock, but I watched for the X Division. Shamrock deserves a lot of respect, and he's gotten it. That's why he went into the TNA Hall of Fame. But it, as we move forward, I started wondering, when is this company going to grow? When is it going to grow? And it didn't take long at all. I think less than 2 years, and they started talking about going to Fox Sports Net. This got me really pumped up. I got on the TNA street teams. I started passing out flyers, telling people everywhere what TNA was. I was hooked. I was a diehard TNA fan. And we passed out all these flyers. I remember telling people, I remember having TNA parties at my house, and just getting people really watching TNA all the time, telling people about TNA wrestling. And if you did have Fox Sports Net, you could watch TNA 100 bazillion times because it was on all the affiliates, and it would replay over and over and over and over again. And that was pretty cool. I used to tell my friends, go watch it, go watch it, go watch it, watch it every single time. Because I thought ratings really didn't matter back then. I don't think it mattered too much. Because TNA was actually paying to be on FSN, not the other way around, the way it's supposed to be. But they were just trying to be on national exposure, trying to sell pay-per-views. Because they were changing the concept to monthly pay-per-views. And the first pay-per-view, a lot of people really, really liked it. It was Victory Roads. It had Macho Man Randy Savage, Kevin Nash. I believe Scott Hall was on that show, on the Kings of Wrestling thing. I think that was going on around that time. And I particularly was just like, why are they bringing in all these old guys? I know why now, because that's truly what draws. And it did, because I think their first pay per view was significantly higher than some of the competitors that had tried big shows, other than WWE, of course. Like World Wrestling All Stars had tried to do monthly pay per views, were not very successful, and Victory Roads had a higher buy rate than all of their shows, like three of their shows combined. And from there, I said, when's this thing getting bigger? When can we get on a big network and get paid to be on network? And it didn't take long. Rumors of a bigger network coming along, and then thought this FSN wanted to pull the plug. So this was the first time TNA really faced a big, big hurdle, other than when they were losing their funding from Jarrett Sports and Entertainment was losing their funding and had to go to Panda Energy. After that, this was going to be Fox Sports Net was pulling the plug, so they were forced into going to the internet. And internet wasn't what it is today back then. They were on the Real Player. You had to download the Real Player and then download their shows weekly off their website. That didn't go on long because it wasn't long before they announced the deal with Spike TV. But the deal really, really wasn't that good. It was at 11 o'clock. It was at 11 o'clock on Saturday night for 1 hour, which really, really sucked. And from there, they were told they were moving to prime time, but once again, it was Thursday nights at 11 o'clock. Again, it really just sucked. But from there, they ended up moving to 9, and from 9 o'clock, they ultimately ended up getting a 2 hour show on Thursday nights, which seemed like the best time as far as where TNA was status wise, because they would go on to make horrible decisions like bringing on Hulk Hogan and going to Monday nights. I don't think Monday nights was as big of a problem as a lot of people made it out. I think doing it with Hulk Hogan was the big problem. Um, and obviously they had some of the. I missed out on telling you about Raven versus Jeff Jarrett, which was one of the big feuds in the Wednesday night era. That was really, really exciting. Although Jarrett did win, and it should have been Raven that won that match because Raven was the younger star and he still had a lot left in the tank at the time. Raven should have won that match, and he didn't. Jarrett won again. And I understand why Jarrett won because he thought he was the biggest star in the company. He really was the biggest star in the company. He was the only guy who was a former WCW World Champion. That was a constant in TNA, and he felt like that was necessary, and maybe it was. But Raven could have been a guy that could have took the company to the next level, but they missed the opportunity. They would go on and miss opportunities all the time. I'll think about more in the future with Bobby Roode versus James Storm, where James Storm should have beat Bobby Roode for the world title at Bound for Glory, but it turned out being at Lockdown. It should have been at Bound for Glory, but that didn't happen either. But needless to say, going back to where I was, they brought in Hulk Hogan, and it was just a horrible, horrible decision. They gave Hogan way too much control. He brought in the Nasty Boys. He brought in a lot of his old friends, and he just took them for a bunch of easy paychecks and got all his friends good paychecks too. That didn't bring anything to the table. I particularly think about the Nasty Boys coming to TNA, Orlando Jordan coming to TNA. I'm not saying Orlando Jordan was his friend. I'm saying that he had a name and they thought anybody with a name should come into TNA. Just horrible, horrible decisions, and it led to some really bad things. But one thing that happened at that time was Dixie Carter sent an email saying how bad Spike TV was, and to be honest, Spike TV wasn't that great. They never, other than when they brought in Hogan, didn't really jump on board and support TNA. And if you're gonna support them when they bring in Hogan, you're not supporting them at a very good time. They should have been supporting them like that at the same level when they first got them in 2005, and TNA would have been light years ahead of where they became because they were hot. They were a hot product when Samoa Joe was undefeated. Um, and then when Kurt Angle came in, they were just tremendously a hot product. If they would have had the support back then, going 2 hours or even going to Monday nights with Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe, doesn't that sound so much better? Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe storylines playing out on Monday night versus what did play out on Monday night. And the highlights of the Monday night era was probably the Jay Lethal Ric Flair woo off, which actually originally got booed at the beginning of that segment. But that was one of the biggest highlights in the Monday Night Wars with TNA. Um, it just wasn't good. Now we move on to what is good. They went through the Destination X, Destination America, I mean, and they went through the Pop. Just horrible, dismal times in TNA. A lot of people said that they were 6 foot under, and they were pretty close. But I never gave up on TNA. I never thought, not until COVID. And I've done my COVID video, which has actually had some success on the channel. Um, During COVID, I gave up on wrestling, period. I just couldn't deal with not having crowds. Crowds are the soundtrack of professional wrestling, and you need crowds. And it was so obvious. It killed Ring of Honor, like I said in my COVID video. It killed Ring of Honor, and it it really hurt wrestling. Yeah, it hurt TNA really bad. It made every product unwatchable. Just because, like I said in my COVID video, you can have a football game. You can still score a touchdown when there's no crowd. You can still hit a home run when there's no crowd. But you just can't do professional wrestling when there's no crowd because you really don't know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are because there's no audience to tell you. And especially if you're a first time viewer, you're so fucking confused. Um, I do want to talk about one of the WWE matches, and they were actually during the commercial break, since there was no live crowd, they just stood around. But when they came back on accident from the commercial, the guys were still, the girls actually, were still standing in the ring, just standing there, weren't even wrestling. And that came across on mainstream television. They were just standing in the ring, they weren't even wrestling. Just horrible things like that happened during the COVID era. And I completely got out of the wrestling loop during that time. When COVID was over, my friends started telling me that TNA's in talks with talking about going to a major network again, as big as Spike TV or bigger than Spike TV. And I started getting intrigued and started getting interesting because I really wanted that to happen. And I started watching Impact on a weekly basis again. And from there, I started watching, and they did Slamversary, and Slamversary was the most attended TNA show in the United States. That just got me so amped up. Mike Santana versus Trick Williams, which I think was a great story, with Trick being the WWE guy, and Mike Santana had to overcome the machine that is WWE. I thought it was a great story. Joe Henry was that world champion at the time, which I hated because I hated Joe Henry. I always thought Joe Henry was a WWE guy at heart because his characters turn around, say my name, all the bullshit that comes with Joe Henry. It seems like a WWE character, and it was, and so I'm not surprised he ended up going to WWE, and I hope him all the success. But I'm glad he's not in TNA anymore. But Mike Santana versus Trick Williams, I thought was, because I always thought Trick Williams was the better WWE guy as far as he did. He was a sports entertainer too, but I thought he was better at it than. I just don't get into the comedy shit that comes along with Joe Henry. So Mike Santana was my guy. He's become my favorite wrestler, and I am totally into the product because of him. And when they sold out and had the biggest attendance, and it looked like Mike Santana was going to win in his hometown, but he came up short. It was deflating, but I understand why they did it, because they wanted to continue the story to Bound for Glory, which was the right call. Then he won the world title on the biggest stage of them all, in front of another sellout crowd, the largest crowd in TNA history, Bound for Glory. To do that back to back, you knew that there was momentum being created, and I totally was on board. Then the talk of CW and AMC and A&W, or another fucking network. I'll just say that. There was two networks, A&E, and CW network were on the plate. And then out of nowhere, rumors came that TNA was talking to AMC. And I immediately started going, holy shit, I hope this one's right. because AMC's had Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Mad Men, and Better Call Saul. I was like, if they get on this network, it's over. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. And I was ecstatic. I was I was blown away at the idea that this was even in the talks. I immediately said, guess what? This means more money. No matter who they get a deal from, they're going to get more money because AMC's in play. That means more money's in play. So if they get a deal with CW, they're going to get more money than they originally were going to get. And then on some random Monday night, there was this tweet from AMC that it was just a crowd chanting, but you couldn't tell what they were chanting. It was just a crowd, but it did definitely sound like a wrestling crowd. And then the date, January 15th, was on it. I knew. At that point, I knew. I made my video saying TNA is going to AMC, and I just knew it was official. The next night, that Tuesday night, they announced the deal. And what got me out of the gate was the fact that they were already on board more than Spike TV was on board initially. They put them straight on Thursday nights, straight in prime time, and for 2 hours. That was more than Spike TV did. So I was like, that means that if they continue to succeed, if TNA delivers on Thursday nights with good numbers and brings it harder than ever, I think AMC will return the favor and they will pump TNA harder than ever and they will push TNA the same way they pushed Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, and so many other hit shows. And TNA has the biggest shot they've ever had. And I am so ecstatic about what TNA on AMC means, especially when you look at the guys like Mike Santana, Leon Slater, and AJ Francis that lead the charge. TNA has a real shot of doing something very, very incredible. And that's how I really got into TNA wrestling from the start to the finish. And we're not at the finish because TNA is here to stay. But that's how from then until now, that's how I became a TNA wrestling fan. I'm Kent Jones. I'm signing off.